Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. In interactions with some of the students of knowledge, in particular those who are interested in studying fiqh, we find that there's some confusion regarding to how to deal with madhabi-based fiqh. Firstly, a proper study of any madhab requires understanding how to deal with the books of the madhab that you're studying, or how to approach madhabi fiqh in general. And the ulama have composed texts that serve as a basis, an introduction for the student who does not have experience in dealing with madhab works or madhab based works or fiqh books. The problem that people encounter is that they approach the works of the ulama without having experience, without having studied with ulama or having an understanding of how to deal with the books of the ulama. And this is most unfortunate. And part of this problem comes when we orient ourselves toward knowledge in such a way that we think approaching Islamic knowledge is about being a student that is a reader of a text. For the majority of Islamic history, the book, the text, the work, whatever you want to call it, has always gone hand in hand, its study, with studying under ulama. And so what happens is that there is an oral tradition that accompanies the written tradition. And for lack of a better word at the moment, I'm using tradition, but I like to use the term scholarly literature or the scholarly inheritance. Is closer to the text that reads that يعني العلماء ورثة الأنبياء. العلماء ورثة الأنبياء. That the ulama are the inheritors of prophethood. So, as a point of advice, the issue of approaching a madhab can be confusing, given the number of different types of texts that you encounter. There's no madhab that's written without dalil. There's no madhab that doesn't have a position of clarity within it. The problem is that many of the students of knowledge don't understand. They are estranged from the very process of learning that was there with the scholars of old and is there with some ulama. So, for instance, one of the mashaykh, he wrote a book called ثمر الداني. ثمر الداني في كيفية البحث في الفقه الإسلامي. So this book is about كيفية البحث في الفقه الإسلامي. Is a book that talks about how to do research in Islamic fiqh. We also have the book that was written by the previous Mufti of Egypt, Al-Madkhal. And we have a series of other books. Sheikh Al-Hafnawi rahimahullah, he wrote a book that deals with the mustalahat, the terminologies which are used by the ulama, whether it's the terminology which pertains to fiqh or the terminology which pertains particular to the books that they use, or the terminology which is used to encode, or the terminology which is used and the terminology and symbols that are used within books, how to decode these things. There's even works that talk about weights and measurement, because the weights and measurements of the past are quite different from what we use today. So there are books that support the study of fiqh. But a person who just opens up a book without any of this experience will never have this understanding. And this is why the ulama, they say, لا تأخذ العلم من صحفي. Don't take your knowledge, right, from a person that is just only reading books. Because along with the book comes an explanation. Along with the book comes with what? An expansion of meaning, which comes from the ulama, those who understand how to work with the text. As a matter of fact, those who have studied with the ulama know that in the process of studying, many times the scholar is correcting the text, correcting the work, right? And because the work is not considered a final product, the only book that is guaranteed the ismah, that's guaranteed infallibility, is the book of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. Is the book of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. Then after that we have the hadith works, right, which have been corrected and checked and revised and so on and so forth. So when we talk about any study of fiqh, we have to talk about, first of all, al-nuskha al-mu'tamida, yani the edition of the work that is most dependent upon, right, or is most dependable, or is verified, or is researched and edited properly, right, is compared with different manuscripts to make sure that that edition has the least amount of mistakes. That's the first. The second is that we have to look at the shuruhat. We have to look at the various explanations, because the ulama, they come and they explain the text, and then they'll say, well, this opinion is weak in the madhab, but this opinion is strong in the madhab, right? So then you have to know what scholars you can depend upon in this effort. And yes, it becomes a little complicated. It becomes a little complicated because we're talking about a process. We're talking about a system of activity. We're talking about a series of processes that go into scholarly effort. So without understanding this dynamic and this complex of ideas and efforts and actions and etiquette, of course there will be confusion. Of course there will be confusion. And that's why it's important for the student of knowledge to humble himself and herself, right? And that's why it's important to support the ulama, even with their deficiencies, right? So that we can learn these things, and so that we're able to be connected with our scholarly inheritance, rather than being estranged and disconnected and frustrated and confused and disoriented, right? This orientation that we have toward knowledge comes from being disconnected. So people think that I grab from here and there, I take this book and that book, I read this, I heard this, I that, and at the end we have no foundation in the deen. We have no foundation in Islamic scholarly understanding. A bunch of ideas it doesn't mean anything. You know, a series of ideas, if we take Western knowledge, we'll say factoids. A bunch of facts don't mean much. If we take from the Islamic scholarly tradition, right, يعني هذا يعني مجموعة من الأفكار بدون منظومة علمية سليمة. يعني to have a bunch of ideas is just to have a series of ideas which are disconnected, that don't work in a network of ideas which are systematic, and that network of ideas is considered sound as a process of thought, right? As a process of thought. So the ulama, they had a systematic network that was operating in the way they thought. And if the student of knowledge doesn't build that system in mind, student of knowledge will always be deficient. That's why we find that Qadi Ibn al-Arabi rahmatullahi alayhi, we find that he encouraged that the study of writing and mathematics and stuff like that precede any other knowledge. And he was a student of Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah. And the reason for this is because he looked at the necessity of building, right, the intellect in such a way that it is prepared to have knowledge. Like contemporary scholars like Sheikh Uthaymeen critiqued them for that, because Sheikh Uthaymeen saw another system. He saw that the Quran should be the first thing to be studied. But that understanding misses the concept that Qadi Ibn al-Arabi had in mind. Right? So this is the issue that we confront. How to develop the culture of being a student of knowledge. And that won't come until we humble ourselves and we support the ulama and we ask about these things. We ask about how to build an educational system, right, which supports continuity in learning. And that's not going to come by just talking about isnat. That's not just going to come by just talking about tradition. That's not going to come like that. So the reality at the end of the day is that there is a necessity to understand the systems of education that were in place in the East and the West and the Muslim world, and how it is to benefit from them, and then to understand how to study. To understand how to study, right? So that is what they call, a question of metacognition, right? How to think. Is thinking about thinking about learning, metacognition in that sense. It's not just about learning, it's also about thinking about how to learn, right? And so we have a lot of works that deal with this issue. But the confusion that we find with regard to how to approach fiqh texts has to do with the fact that a simple understanding of works like this, كيفية البحث, كيفية البحث, the process of how to do research in Islamic fiqh is absent. So then we don't know how, if we encounter multiple narrations in the madhab, we don't know how to deal with it. If we encounter weak opinion, we don't know if we can use it or not. We claim we know you can only use the fatwa opinion. But when you go deeper, you find, there's processes and procedures in place and principles in place that will allow a weak opinion to be used with certain conditions, right? So we have to understand how to work with the madhab. It's not just the issue of reading a book in the madhab, but also how to work with the madhab, how to research in the madhab, what books are the primary books to utilize. And then also, some books in the madhab give you skills and ability, and some books don't. Some books just chronicle opinions, and other books build you. Other books build your orientation towards dalil and evidence and shows you how to apply the principles of the madhab, how to approach a hadith, how to approach an ayah of the Quran, how to categorize this opinion stronger than that opinion. That's a book that is a form of education which is about building processes and aptitude. Then there's other books that just communicate opinions. This person said, that person said, right? So that's a different type of book. So within Islamic scholarly thought, there's a lot of different types of books that we encounter that have different functions. But if we don't understand that, then we will always be locked out of the scholarly legacy. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر لي ولكم والحمد لله رب العالمين. يا ربنا زدنا علما وتقوى ومغفرة.